Live. And I'm not sure if this is a class in session or if this is a history and politics. But what I do know is that this video is about Nelson Mandela. Um, I have just been going through autobiographies. Autobiography of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Um, of course, um, drawing a blank. Malcolm X, MLK, Marcus Garvey, Mahatma Gandhi, and Nelson Mandela. Now, Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X is basically the soul of black folk. Um, I believe that is, I would say the Bible was the most influential book I had read up until the time of the autobiography of Malcolm X. Now, they're completely two different books, so I'm not trying to make Christians mad. Um, the impact of the book and where I am as far as religion at post 50 creates a different impact. So, the autobiography of Malcolm X is really the to take a word from W.E.B. Du Bois. He was the soul of black folks. That's what Brother Malcolm was. And the strongest thing about Malcolm X was he always did the best he knew. When he when he knew the streets, he did the streets. When he knew the nation, he did the nation. When he went to Mecca, he did Mecca. And he was always trying to do the best he knew. And so in that book, you could change out any oppressed people, women, uh, LGBTQ, Africans, uh, Indian people, Native Americans. You could take out the name Black people and insert that, and the story of the autobiography of Malcolm X applied. That was a great book. Gandhi. Don't know why I chose that one. Glad I did. That helped me to understand the framework of imperialism, of British imperialism, and how broad it was, and how these systems that we think of as American were tested all over the world before we did it. We thought, a lot of black people think that Jim Crow was an American reality. That stuff was being done in India 50 years before Jim Crow. That not educate, making it illegal for people to have education, not allowing people to marry, only being able to move without papers, only whites have the ability to vote. Uh, uh, Even in prisons where whites got better food than imprisoned blacks, and um, caste and class systems, all of those things were being tested way before these things were happening here. So, in reading these autobiographies, it kind of made this Columbian exchange as to where these things that we are taught as Americans just kind of happened as an accident. There was no clandestine plan uh, by whites to hurt blacks or to hurt Native Americans. Or no, it was clandestine plans. The Willie Lynch letter, all that stuff was just on this side of the water. But when you see the exact oppression systems, CRT, if you will, being done in India, being done in Australia, being done in South Africa, being done in different parts of Africa, you're like, oh, this was a global system. This wasn't a mistake. And that's how we're kind of taught about American history, is that that was a mistake and America has bettered itself. No, it wasn't a mistake. And you see this with these systems that are existing in other places in the world, and the reward these people are constantly getting from these systems. So it's not an accident. I then began reading the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. And previous to Nelson Mandela, I did MLK. And I found that there were a lot of things that MLK and I, as a scholar, disagree on. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't agree with a lot of things Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, but everybody knows those things. I think that there's more room to discuss where we didn't agree and the mistakes that he made, and how future freedom fighters or political leaders don't get caught up in making those mistakes. And what really started making me think about some of the misgivings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is the people that have started to really quote him, which are our conservative politicians. I'm like, okay, if the people who have traditionally extracted labor and wealth out of the poor are elevating even aspects of a person, you have to question those aspects and thereby question that person. So I really began to read not only Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s autobiography, but his books, the books he wrote. When you're reading books about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you are learning about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from the people that killed him. You have to read what he said and what his intentions were to understand him. I read his autobiography because it was overseen by Coretta Scott King, and it came directly from his papers. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going because I need to know your words. So when you're reading an autobiography, make sure that the person whose biography it is actively involved in it, and what was the process that this autobiography was created. And in Nelson Mandela's case, Time Warner was looking for somebody to write because this is now Nelson Mandela's free, and of course all of the white supremacist world is using a connection to his freedom as some type of absolution for any and every system of white oppression. Um, and they hired a gentleman who wrote a book on a South African country to meet with Nelson Mandela. And this is, like I said, this is after he's been out of prison now. Wasn't nobody trying to write no books while he was in prison. Wasn't nobody trying to write no books about him when he was on the run. Nobody was trying to write books about him when the South African government was trying to send him to jail for life. Nobody was writing books about him when he was a lawyer trying to get his life together. Once he endured the torture of systematic oppression from the minority whites, then we said, now there's this national interest in Nelson Mandela. So um, I learned a lot about continental Africa. I learned a lot about the British system of oppression in South Africa, how it aligns with and overlaps with the systems of oppression that was going on in the United States. And thereby, again, showing how these things weren't accidental. Also, showing how broadly in the European mindset and psyche, and how deeply this desire for things and power and rule run in that people, and how that sickness gets very specific. Like I said, black prisoners wore shorts, and Indian and white prisoners got long pants to remind the Africans that they were boys. Just uh, black. Another thing they had in South Africa, you had Africans, you had coloreds, you had Africana, and then you had whites. So these distinctions are very important. And it's that separation and segregation translates over here. So if you look at mid 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, and mid 20th century, you will see how white supremacy had been existing as it did here in other places of the world when you're reading these autobiographies of these freedom fighters. Now, one thing that obviously Mandela shared with Malcolm and Martin was a degree of selfishness. And I know that's unpopular to say, but a degree of, and I'm not talking like a character flaw selfishness. I'm talking an intense selfishness that you don't hear, that you neglect other responsibilities for this one responsibility that you have. Um, as much as I would like to be a great man or do a great thing, would I not bury my mother? I'm going to take my duty to my mother over my duty to my country. I can almost safely say no. Would I take my duty to my country, to my to the duty to over my wife and kids? I don't know that I would say that. And it takes a certain kind of person to do that. And we can say, looking back on it, that he knew what he was doing, but were you just obsessed with what you were obsessed with, and that was more important than anybody else? And at the end of his book, he does say that he struggled with some of the decisions that he made, but he still made them. Like, Martin knew this is going to probably cost my kids their father. Medgar Evers knew this is more than likely going to cost my kids their father. Now, not to even mention the trauma of seeing this happen, which is the same thing that happened with Malcolm X. And again, all of this is overlapping on how horrible the mindset of white supremacy is that this group of people, Europeans evolving into American whites, would murder men in front of their children. And today, Think about how few American whites, they call it, they have a new term for it, black exhaustion, where they just don't want to hear about it anymore. But why would you not, if you belong to a group, why would you not want to know how far does this rabbit hole go? How far does this psyche go that, we would dismember people and sell the parts? When we look at the pictures of these lynchings, take your eyes off of the person that's lynched and look at the crowd around them: women, children. Um, they have picnic baskets. They would take the pictures and send them out as postage cards. Look it up if you don't believe me. You got your phone? Look up. Did they use lynching pictures as postcards? Um, and to think that this was a worldwide system. This was not something that, oh, this was the worst point in American history. No, this was a norm in European human history. And for whatever reason, the African was chosen to be the bottom of this list. Because even in India, where they treated Indians like they treated black folks here, if black folks were in India, or if Indians were in Africa, the Indians were at least higher than the black folks. So there was always this distinction of the African being the lowest denominator. And I find that Europeans, or especially American whites in academia, run from that conversation, nor is there a big desire to investigate that. But what I really wanted to focus on was the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. And one thing that is a highlight, and I'm generally criticized for not doing this enough. Dennis Goldberg, Joe Slovo, and other white men that were freedom fighters and gave their lives to balance the scale of inequality. And before anybody looking at this video or saying that they have a sense of equality, especially conservative Americans, remember, DEI right now is the bad word, is the boogeyman, just like CRT, critical race theory, was 2 years ago. DEI is the worst thing. We are a country that thinks diversity is bad. We think equality is bad, because that's what equity is. That's the root word. And inclusion, inclusivity, we think that's bad in this country in 2025. That's it. That's what most Americans, by our last vote, feel. And if you are an American, no matter what color you are, you have to wear that. That's my country. When I went over to Europe, they weren't asking me about being a black American. They was asking me about being American. So I couldn't take off my American cloak and go, oh, I'm a black man. No, I had to wear my American cloak as well as my black cloak and explain, yeah, that's our country. And then as a historian, I have to tell them, yeah, that's how our country has always been. But the Statue of Liberty says, bring us your huddled masses, your poor, your this, your this. Yeah, well, actually the Statue of Liberty was supposed to be holding chains. It was commissioned in 1865 when slavery ended. But the whites did not want chains represented on the Statue of Liberty. So they did the torch in the book. But the person who designed it would not abort the chains, and the chains are actually at her feet. And for, mm, I want to say almost 100 years, they did not teach about the chains. It was a professor, a black female, that pushed and protested academically, scholastically, for those chains to be recognized at the feet of Lady Liberty. The reason why the Statue of Liberty was commissioned was for the 13th Amendment. Now it took a long time to build something that big, but that's what it was commissioned for, and it was about the quote unquote ending of slavery. If you don't believe me, look it up. Do your research. I promise you. Now, look it up don't mean go to Google. Google and Chat GPT, that's not necessarily right. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. In fact, go to the Statue of Liberty website, and it'll clear all that up. But we're talking about Nelson Mandela. There were a lot of white people that gave or dedicated their lives. And Dennis Goldberg actually went to prison at the same time, or at least for the same reasons as Nelson Mandela. Now, he went to a different prison because he was white. He ate better food because he was white. He had better clothes because he was white. He had better accommodations because he was white. But there were whites, and always have been whites, that have told the line. We had our Charles Sumners here. We had our Thaddeus Stevens here. We had our John Browns here. But it is the exception and not the rule. But those brothers are there. But again, we look at the toll that this had to take. Like, what kind of man is that? I try to study greatness because I want to align myself with greatness. But then at some point, sometimes great things come from imperfect people. And I don't want to magnify their imperfection, trying to illustrate their greatness. So you really want to watch when you are investigating and trying to absorb these great people that their flaws don't become your flaws, in that you hold on to your greatness because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't necessarily want to practice infidelity. That was something he and his group did. Now, does that diminish the great that he did? No. But is that something that I recognize and say, okay, this can be a part of that, and so I have to negotiate myself in a way that that's not going to be something that I absorb. When you put something above your family, your children, your wives, your because that was something that struck me. It was like, okay, if this brother is functioning at this level of self-actualization, how is he divorced twice? And again, this is not a put down. This is just a scholastic analysis. This is not trying to diminish uh, Nelson Mandela in any way, but this is how my mind is working. And I began to see that there was always in him a a self-centeredness. When he was a child, his father passed away. He was sent to live with his rich family to train him, to elevate him to the job his father had. And when they selected they raised him up in wealth, prosperity. He left. Long story short, he just left because he didn't want to marry the person that they wanted him to marry. And he not only left the people who took care of him, educated him, loved him, was his family, he left his duties. He left his duties to his tribe. He left his duties to his king. He just left. I'm going to do this. I have a duty to my children once I make them. I can't just fly off, you know. Or once I get married, I have duties to this person. I can't just take off. And again, these are different cultures. I understand because Mahatma Gandhi wasn't with his wife many times for months and years at a time. I understand that. But I'm again trying to process this because I'm trying to absorb some of these qualities of greatness in me. Now, this is where possibly my faults come in or his greatness elevates. But some things just don't make sense to me. This was a man who was not afraid to stand up against a government and use his legal training to defend himself, to fight for right. And then when he saw the need, he went underground and set up a military resistance group that basically was violent resistance. Okay, they practiced sabotage. They had military training. He raised money basically for an independent military that would fight against the government, which made sense. Whereas I put his ideology above Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s ideology because he's saying we can't use moral suasion with people that don't have our same moral interests. If I'm trying to love you and you hate me, my love to you means nothing. And if you're hating me and taking from me and I'm loving you, asking for it back, you're not going to give it back because you hate me. And that's where, and I have a video where I disagree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Why are you telling me to negotiate with a person who historically cannot be negotiated with? And you're telling me to hope that this person is the person that you want them to be, as opposed to the person they have demonstrated themselves to be. That just did not make sense, and it does not make sense. And that's why our country is still in the place where it is. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was just wrong. Those people did not and do not have the same value system as people that think like he and I. So we cannot function with them on our moral compass. We have to function with them on theirs. Mandela switched the game up. He then began, I think with age, we all lose our aggression. We heighten in wisdom. But it's the young man, it's the bad man that is out front in society historically. And this reconciliation over revenge, how can we reconcile without repair. It seems like global white America jumped behind Nelson Mandela because there was no requirement of repair. It was okay, moving forward, clean slate. Well, if I have a hundred or 200 years, because I think the ANC was 82 years old by the time he became president. If I have acquired a century's worth of resources, now you want to move forward with equal rights. I'm economically still advanced. So even if I stop the inequities, the wealth gap has no way to close because there's no repair. See, the inequities were here, so I'm up here. If I repair stuff, now we're here, now we can move forward. But he bought into, in his older age, repair as revenge. And that's the problem they're having in South Africa now, where people are saying, we want repair. You got to give up that land, and we got to redistribute this land. You got to let go of some of these economic advantages that have been passed on, and we need to restructure. And I tell you this, I own more than one home. If a bill came up that said Native Americans want to redistribute property, I would try to negotiate, and I know a lot of Native Americans. I would advocate for my family, but I would not be advocating from a place that they're wrong. And if the government passed that all Americans had to pay an extra $1,000 in taxes to go to reparations to Native Americans, I would not at all argue that. 10,000. I wouldn't argue that. Because that repair has never been done. And I can't look at natives. I've been on Native American reservations. That repair is still evident. And it's evident in South Africa now. And in that way, that Nelson Mandela hurt continental Africans, black continental Africans. Now, one thing he did educate me on is I have listened to other Pan-Africanists, I'll be honest, and I have classified all white South Africans as not Africans, that they are descendants of colonizers. And 9 times out of 10, that may be true. But how about I listen to a continental African? And what he said was, this is a continent of many people. And everyone here, the Indians who are in South Africa are South Africans. The whites who are here in South Africa are South Africans. The blacks who are here in South Africa are South Africans. And coloreds are the mixed races. But the coloreds here are South Africans. And, and it finally resonated with me that, okay, this is a country that people have come to, people have left for many different reasons. And if the president of the country, if the native of the country is telling me, no, everybody belongs here. It's God's land. It's not our land. This land will be here before us and it'll be here after us. This is everybody's land. It's the system that's the problem. Then I need to lay off of my white, South Africans. I do. But that being stated, When he came into power as president, first taking over the ANC and then holding the election where he became president of South Africa, his motto was reconciliation over revenge and equal opportunities for all. Remember, if we've had 100 years, now this, we say if we say 20 years is a generation, we're talking dad, granddad, great granddad, great great granddad, great 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 granddad. Do you see how far back we're going in building family wealth? What if these people are allowed to be educated? You see how that education is building? This group has no education. So even when they have no wealth, so even when I get to run against you, I don't have any wealth passed down to compete with you. When we begin to debate, I got 5 generations of no education. So us coming out of the gate without repair as equals, that's just not even a real, that's not enough by itself. And to represent it as a victory by itself is a mistake. And as Nelson Mandela put it, he put it to the South Africans as, okay, you're still going to have to do the work, though you have the privileges. And you're not, as he said, you're not going to be driving Mercedes immediately after our first uh, when you get to vote. But no, it's not just up to me having to work. That's still functioning under the implication that we have in the United States, that the reason that you don't have is because you don't work, or that the reason why you don't know is because you haven't studied, or that you're not smart enough, or that you're not whatever enough. Not that there has been a system that has put you in the position you're in, and then a set of laws put in place to buffer you from penetrating that system. That's why white supremacy is here, this wealth gap is here, and that this group doesn't catch up. It's because that there are laws set in between there to stop you from doing it. Convict leasing, Jim Crow, Plessy versus Ferguson, of the fact that women couldn't vote, coverture. All of these things were put in place by law to stop that penetration. The fact that blacks have been able to penetrate in any way in this country is a testimony to the ingenuity and genius of black people, because there are so many legal systems that are put in place, economic systems that are put in place, social systems that's put in place, educational systems that's put in place for us not to. And when we're studying this in America, we're thinking that this is us in a vacuum, but no, this is the same thing that is cookie cuttered in South Africa. This is the same thing that is cookie cuttered all over the African continent, in India, in other parts of Asia, and in Australia. Now, the Rainbow Nation, that is the multicultural program supported by Nelson Mandela. My question is, if you see all South Africans as your brothers and sisters, why are you not appealing to those brothers and sisters for reparation? Why is it the wealth gap is still there? You're telling this group to work harder to come up, but not telling this group you're going to have to scale back. Why does the rainbow only work this way? Why doesn't that rainbow say, hey guys, our history teaches that this was not right? And the way you got this was not right. So we're going to need you to pull it back and we're going to have them level up. And then, then we'll be good. That wasn't it. It was love over hate. Now, let's take religion out of it. What other parts in our society do we preach love over hate in our economies? No. They don't cut your gas and lights off because they love you or don't love you. You paid the bill or you didn't. If you go to court, the system is not based on if they love you or don't love you. The system is based on the law. Did you do it? Did you not do it? Do you have evidence to prove this? Do you have evidence to prove that? Why is it when we begin to talk about culturally based race systems that are in the form of governments that the resolution is love? When no other part of government or society is love. We love this person, but if he don't get enough votes, that's the person who gets the job. We love this person, but if they don't have enough money to buy this, they can't have it. Reconciling a pathway to healing. To reconcile is not the same thing to repair. To reconcile is like, hey, you know what? Let's stop and do something different. Let's move forward together. That's reconciliation. But for us to truly reconcile, there has to be a repair. And in reading that very long book, I did not see as much focus by Nelson Mandela on repair as it was on reconcile. And that is indicative in the leadership of white supremacy loving you, or the masses of white culture loving you as a black person, when there is no accountability or reparation based on the acts of the group. That's when you get, oh, he's the greatest. Now, you wasn't the greatest while you was locked up for 27 years. Where was this world full of loving European and white Americans when he was locked up for 27 years? For 3 decades, this man was locked up. But not just come out, when he came out with this message of reconciliation without repair. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about love and civil rights, just be nice, be civil. He was fine when he started talking about money. See, that's why you got to read Chaos or Community. Where do we go from here? His last book, which was in 1966, after the 1965 Voters' Rights Act. When he started saying, "Ooh, wow, this is about money. This is not about treatment. This is about cash." Then all of a sudden he's not loved by whites and gets shot in the face. But the continued struggle is another thing that Nelson Mandela pushed to the end of his life. And I'm like, okay, are we talking about a continued struggle, or are we talking about reconciliation over revenge? Because some people look at reconciliation as revenge. the beneficiaries of the white supremacy in South Africa, in India, and in America was looked at as unfair. There was a question that came up. I'm sorry I missed it. You can post it again. I'll see it. I'll answer it. But the issue of reconciliation, you have to watch words and what words mean. Am I really trying to reconcile with you if I'm not trying to fix what it was that I did? Can we get on the same page? If I have your family's food and I say, okay, we're going to be friends moving forward, but I'm not going to give you any of the food back. Your family's still hungry, but we're not mad at each other anymore. No, I need some repair. I need this food for my family to eat. How do you think we got billionaires in this country and we have people that work 60 hours a week having trouble paying their bills? There is a lack of reconciliation and repair just on poor people. Take black out of it. The labor force, where people are extracting unheard of amounts of wealth from the American people and allowing them to be, they know how much stuff costs because they own it. They know how much groceries cost. They know how much utilities cost. They know how much housing costs. They know how much transportation costs. And they pay you a percentage of that. So you will constantly have to come back and work for them and not build enough wealth for you to do something on your own. They know that. So how are we doing a continued struggle? Are we struggling for reconciliation? Because if you're struggling for reconciliation, your family still doesn't have groceries. So, a great man who did an unheard of thing. I mean, just insurmountable patience, dedication. And when I was receiving my doctorate degree, my professor who was hooding me leaned over to me and said, you know, something is wrong with everybody that gets this degree. He said, normal people don't obsess over something to the extent to which we do. And to enter academic scholarship is an indication of greatness. It's an indication of greatness. Does it make you great in and of itself? No, it's kind of what you do with it. But that's a great accomplishment. I'm not going to take away from it. And people who obsess over things like Shaquille O'Neal, like great athletes who play basketball on Christmas, and when they play all year away from their families, and in the summer they train all year, and their kids grow up and they hardly know their kids. They have this undenying focus that overrides everything to be great at it. And Mike Tyson had a very great statement where he said, the attempt to being great is greatness in itself. I hope so, because I'm attempting. I don't know if I'll make it. But Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, I don't think Garvey had kids, but King, Mandela, Gandhi, um, I think their elevated sense of politics and community was an obsession of theirs that was greater than the love for their kids, that was greater than the love for their wife. And they're going to say, no, it wasn't. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It's not popular to say. And again, scholarship, we learn in those uncomfortable places. I'm going to that uncomfortable place. I don't want to, if I have, if I can't take care, if I can't be the person my grandmother looked at eye to eye as she was leaving here, I don't want to be that guy. If I for to be that guy, I could not have done that job for my grandmother. I don't want to be that guy. To when my brother passes away, to fly home and get with my eldest brother, and we take leadership on putting our brother away and tell our parents, you just tell us what you want, and we're gonna make this happen for you. If I gotta do the if being great to the people means that I'm not great to the people the universe made closest to me, my obsession is too big. And then it's no longer a pilgrimage. It's no longer a pilgrimage is the wrong word. It's no longer a ministry. It's an obsession. Um, I don't want to be that part of that guy. So perhaps maybe that is my greatness. That I can, I'm not so obsessed with something that it's unhealthy to my duty to everything else. And Gandhi mentioned it with his family. Mandela mentioned it. Malcolm mentioned it. Well, Malcolm really didn't mention it. He mentioned it, but not to the extent to which that the others said, yeah, this is a problem. Dr. King really didn't write an autobiography. They pulled it from his books, but he didn't. But you could tell, I mean, from the story that came out, bro, you knew where this was headed. And you kept going anyway. And I don't know if that part of greatness. So at the end of the day, either academically, financially, talent wise, whatever it is you're following great people for, completely gain an understanding of who they were and understand the downfalls that existed within their greatness and not capture those two. You know what I mean? That was something that I learned in these biographies. Now I'm starting a book about the Greek philosophers and that being actually derived or stolen from Egyptian civilization. Now, this is something I am aware of, but I really want to get into it with greater specificity. But I'm kind of at a lack for another autobiography right now. So I'll probably try to finish this book this month, and I'll spend the rest of this month trying to find another biography, autobiography or biography to really gain an understanding of these people and these circumstances. So Again, like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions, definitely leave them for me. Um, and we will check you guys out.